gentlemen, good evening, great scholars. Thank you so much for joining us once again tonight. My name is Mazwe Majola. I'm from the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development. We develop leaders, we empower leaders, we produce world-class leaders. We think and we are convinced that leadership is a journey, leadership is not a destination. Therefore, as long as you're a leader, you've got to constantly develop yourself. That's why we meet every Wednesdays here in this community of leaders, where we come to learn, we come to unlearn, to relearn, and to co-learn together as leaders and scholars, so that we can improve in our leadership journey. Because you stop reading, you stop learning, you stop growing, you become obsolete in leadership. So thank you so much for joining us again. Tonight, we've got a wonderful speaker. We've got a wonderful topic that we'll be tackling tonight. I'm so excited about this topic, very important, the most appropriate topic. Let me first welcome our regulars and our members, those men and women who are here almost every Wednesday, so as often as possible. We learn a lot from each other, and that's why we are here, to learn from each other. And the special welcome to those colleagues who are joining us for the first time. If we are here for the first time, thank you so much for joining us, and please do participate where possible. Don't hold back. Don't feel that it's your first time, so you're gonna just listen. Yeah, it's important to listen, but also would like to hear from you as well. So thank you so much. Please relax and feel at home and enjoy the session. It's where we've got scholars here, academics from different universities. We've got politicians, we've got members of the media, we've got executives from public sector, from private sector. We've got community leaders, religious leaders, professionals from all walks of life. So this is where leadership meet. And that is this, and actually it's a safe space where as leaders we empower each other, we correct each other, we admonish each other, we encourage each other, we inspire each other, because who's going to do it if we don't do it to each other? So please do feel at home and enjoy the session. Tonight we are discussing ethical leadership and governance, the most important topic and the most suitable and appropriate topic. I'm sure you will agree with me, especially in South Africa and in Africa, because obviously we've got colleagues who are joining us from all over the world: Nigeria, Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania, and in other areas as well, whether it's USA, UK, and other places that who join this platform. So thank you so much for joining us. Tonight we are addressed by a very special person in my life, by my leader, my professor. It's one of our own here, Professor Gordon Dodomzi Zide. We all know him here. He guides us, he leads us. We learn a lot from him always when he speaks. That's why when I requested him to address us, he was like, "Oh, but my professor, we need to give others a chance at the speak." Yes, we do. I said, yes, we do that, but also we always tap into our own, because we know that we are so blessed in this platform. As I said, it's a platform of experts, really. Everyone here, we can just pick up and say, please address us, as they always do. So Professor Zide is one of our faculty members, and also, as I said, one of our leaders here who really inspire us a lot. So I'm so happy that he has really, reluctantly accepted my invitation to say, no, but Professor, we always learn a lot from you. We know you are one of our own, but please, we also like to learn from you. You always go and address other people. He always shares with me when to where, invited where, so you also want him to be here with us. Most of you know him, but just to remind you some few about him. He's a professor emeritus in anthropology from UNISA. He is a fellow of the IPM, South Africa IPM. You know, the IPM president, Sis Silva, is one of us here in this platform. And also, it's got the management of higher education institution from Galilee College in Israel. He also got a public policy and governance, or he did a public policy and governance from University of Geneva in Switzerland. And also he's got legal studies diploma from Oxbridge Academy. He's got postgraduate diploma in labor law post-level 7. He's got an intellectual property law, or he did an intellectual property law from UCT and also from Stellenbosch. He's a former, actually he's the first black registrar of the University of Fort Hare, and also he's the former registrar at the UNISA and the former vice chancellor and principal at Vaal University of Technology. He's a scholar. He's written so many books. Actually, he's written a book on the topic that we'll be addressing as we. He's got a book on ethical leadership and governance. He contributed a chapter on this book that we've just released recently, The Power of Women in Leadership. Actually, he's the one who even came or suggested that topic when he instructed me to publish this book. And I was telling my wife that the way Professor Zide is really pushing me so hard. He's already speaking about our next project. When is our next book project? My professor, when are we starting that? So we might be starting another new book project. But we are so happy, my professor, really. I know that, as I've said, most of the people who are here, they know you, that you are one of our own. But when you present to us, we don't see you as like that. We see you as a speaker and someone who is inspiring us and empowering us in our super master classes that we always have. Thank you so much, my professor. Over to you. We are so eager to learn from you and to hear from you. Thank you, sir.
Evening. The prof forgot to mention that on the 6th of October, I actually turned 72. So I am an old man. I'm an old man, really. But on a very serious note, we drove from PE yesterday. I'm still suffering from the drive leg, not the jet lag. At 72, driving 10 hours on the road, it's not a child's play. But I have had to say, well, of all the people that my dear professor could have chosen, he asked me. And so I said, well, not so much asked, but it was an instruction. And I said, well, look, as part of this wonderful team of the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development, let me agree. The topic is very close to my heart, and it's divided into two sections. As of course the topic suggests, it's ethical leadership and governance. And so we are going to first discuss our understanding of ethical leadership, thereby providing the definition of ethical leadership and why we need ethical leadership and capacity for ethical leadership, the principles of ethical leadership, as well as the benefits of ethical leadership. And then that would be followed by the definition of governance, the relationship between ethical governance and leadership, and the principles shared between the two. And then, of course, we will conclude by asking, why do we need ethical leadership and governance, particularly at this time of our history in governance? And of course, I also like closing off by quoting my favorable author and motivational speaker, Leo Buscaglia. So that is going to be the shape of our conversation. And therefore, let us start. And of course, I will try and give some leadership definitions, which I have taken from Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, as well as the definition from Martin Luther King Jr. Just to give this in context, Robert Sobukwe defines leadership, which I believe that we can view it from the perspective of ethical leadership. And then he says, and I quote, "True leadership demands complete subjugation of self, absolute honesty, integrity, and uprightness of character." That is what Sobukwe says. And then we can apply that to ethical leadership as well. But Dr. Martin Luther King says ethical leadership demands sound integrity and to be in love with justice and prioritize humanity over personal gain or publicity, and also take a stand in the midst of adversities. I think for me, that is very, very critical, because as ethical leader, if one is not able to take a stand in the midst of adversities, one needs to begin to question one's commitment to leadership. Ethical leadership is about standing upright in an environment that is upside down. And so to attempt to do the right things at the right time and in the right manner. Because without that, we would be rocking the boat in an opposite direction. But of course, we have to look at what our understanding of ethical leadership is. And I've tried to explain that ethical leadership is about doing the right things, and ethics refers to an accepted principles of right or wrong that govern the conduct of a person, the members of a profession, or the actions of an organization. So that is very, very critical, because if we fail to do that, then we would be losing our focus in that particular environment. Of course, ethical leadership is not about pleasing everybody. As an ethical leader, one should understand that there will be times of crises and times of loneliness and times of walking the talk rather than talking the walk. How do you walk the talk? As a leader, particularly ethical leader, you should be prepared to be scoffed at. You should be prepared to be looked down upon and to have so many negative things said about you. And then, of course, you can't go on to telling people that I'm an ethical leader. Ethical leadership has got to be observed, but people should see you as an ethical leader through your own actions and word, rather than you going out saying, I'm an ethical leader. No, 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 no. You can't define yourself as an ethical leader, but people should. And when people define you as an ethical leader, and that comes to your attention, it does not mean that you must now all of a sudden change the person you are. In fact, if people approach you with a very positive feedback and say, wow, you know, in Prof. Majola, we have an ethical leader. Prof. Majola will, with great humility, say, oh, I did not realize that, but thank you so much. You know, on this platform, we always argue, and quite rightly so, that in South Africa, we have many leaders, but no leadership. I know that sometimes this might be seen as contradiction in terms. Remember, Prof. Majola says that leadership is not a destination. Leadership is a journey. But in South Africa, particularly in the South African political context, you get people who view and perceive leadership as a destination. When people are occupying high offices, uh, many of them, not some, sorry, some of them, not many of them, regard themselves as having arrived. And that's why we have so many scandals today. I was listening at the uh, Mkwanazi committee, appearing before the Committee of Parliament, and he's raising quite critical ethical questions, which begin to test the sincerity of our government and the sincerity of leadership in South Africa. And one would begin to say, do we really have an upright leadership in South Africa? And the question for me is that as things are right now, you will understand when I share with you the principles of ethical leadership. But as things stand right now, I think that if an assessment would have to be done on the leadership in South Africa, we would be found wanting, because of a number of skeletons rattling in the cupboard. Remember, Batabile Dlamini, the minister, well, she was then Minister of Social Development. She was responding to a question, and she said that everybody knows that in the NEC or in the ANC, whatever angle one perceives it, is that everybody knows that we've got our smaller yana skeletons in our cupboard. Now, when you have smaller yana skeletons rattling in your cupboard, put a big question mark. Am I providing ethical leadership in the department in which I am? Or am I providing ethical leadership in government generally? And this is not to attack any particular individual, but it is an attempt to indicate and demonstrate that ethical leadership and leadership in general in South Africa is really wanting, particularly against the definition that I gave on ethics, referring to accepted principles of right or wrong that govern the conduct of a person, the members of a profession, or the actions of the organization. And therefore, ethics is of great importance to a good business. That is important, because without ethics, I think we would not be gathered here tonight. And then, of course, the book that I wrote on ethical leadership and governance is published by Smith. It's available on the what do you call it, my professor? These things which ebook. Yeah, you get it via ebook. I would advise Bukeka that you get it. Not that I'm promoting my book, but I'm simply trying to promote what we are doing at World, because Prof. Majola and Dr. Majola came with this idea of this platform at a time when the country was in darkness, during the COVID. God works with people to produce good fruit and results. And what ignited that passion from them, I honestly don't know. But it came at an appropriate time that the country is in slumber and we need something to excite the country. And it is only when you reflect through such actions that you can say, indeed, in both Prof. Majola and Dr. Majola, we have here people of great integrity and character who do not only look upon themselves, that is the other part of ethical leadership, who do not only look upon themselves, but look at the interests of a broader and wider society. That is what ethical leadership is all about. And so let me then say to you, if we're looking at the principles of ethical leadership, we're talking about respect, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about honesty, we're talking about service, we're talking about justice. When you're looking at all those principles, you would find that indeed it is important for any person who promotes ethical leadership to embrace those principles. Respect not only for other people, but respect even for your own self, because it is important that when you extend respect to other people, it really has to start with you. I remember my professor when I was doing a 3-year course on the Methodist preaching. The supervisor of studies at our church, I was based in Anshel, then in Alice. The late Tatu Jonas used to say, when you go out there and deliver a sermon and you did not practice it and it failed to preach to you as a person, then you must, at that moment, observe that the sermon is empty. So it goes with ethical leadership. That which you practice, you should first practice within your kind self, and that goes with respect. And then let us turn on to accountability. Accountability is about that introspection. And remember, we spoke about the right and wrong. That introspection of saying, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? If your conscience says to you, what I am doing now is not right, it is wrong, then you are on the right path, because your conscience speaks to you about accountability. And of course, being held accountable is being answerable for the actions, which you are doing. And then of service. When we talk service, I'm always amused when you go to government departments. Behind the big desk of an officer, there stands the Batupili principles. And those of you who don't understand the Batupili principles is people first. And there's a book that is written by Prophet Landandwe. Prophet Landandwe is in Swaziland, but he wrote a book about the life and times of King Sobhuza II. And the title of the book is Akusiko kwami kwebantu. It is not about me, it's about the people. That is the essence of ethical leadership, where you, as the definition that I gave of leadership from Utatu Sobukwe, subjugating the self and therefore promoting the essence of regarding others as much bigger than you. That is important. And then, of course, honesty. Honesty is critical. Be honest in small things, and the bigger things will follow. And then striving for justice. We're living in a world of complexities and perplexities, where justice is not done. And as I say that, when you go to these offices, you see the Batupili principles, but the negative attitudes and the negative action of the officer sitting in that big desk is totally against the Batupili principles. And you wonder why the Batu principles are displayed all over the place, when in fact the actions of the people who are supposed to be promoting the Batupele principles are unfortunately not doing that. And so it leaves much to be desired. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But now I would really like us, because we are going to have a nice conversation, I would like us to jump and look at what we understand by corporate governance. By corporate governance, we understand the internal systems encompassing policies, processes, and people that serve the needs of the stakeholders and the stakeholders by directing and controlling management activities with good objectivity and integrity. That is what corporate governance is. And at the nexus of ethical leadership and corporate governance, you would find that the principles of corporate governance include responsibility, accountability, fairness, as well as transparency, effectiveness, deployment, and consistency. Now, let me draw a understanding of this, because they really fall under the same category. If we're talking about responsibility as being the pillars, one of the pillars of corporate governance, what do we understand by that responsibility? It's creating a value of our internal and external stakeholders, knowing that as a responsible officer, your responsibility does not only end with yourself, but it equally ends with the stakeholders. That is critical. And then, of course, we look at accountability. Now, you will realize that accountability is part of governance system, but equally part of ethical leadership. So ethical leadership and governance are really interrelated, because you cannot talk ethical leadership without touching on governance. So that is why even under corporate governance, we have accountability. Accountability, thus providing all the necessary information to the stakeholders regarding the authority, responsibility, and the duties of the officer. Then of fairness. Fairness simply states that what you do should always be treated fairly. Don't treat other people as being more important than others. You should be fair, you should be consistent, you should be transparent, and you should do things in the right manner. And then of transparency is actually a very interesting one, because the question may be, how far do I go to being transparent? Well, when you share information, it's very important to be open, but of course there is that information that is very confidential, not unless you declare. If you declare, it's fine. But all said and done, transparency is good, but there are certain clauses within the organizational policies and procedures that you cannot readily share. But of course, when I was vice chancellor at VUT, we made it a point that the salaries become known, because we were trying to avoid a situation where we would say, no, the executive management salaries are confidential, so that when the organized labor is toying about the gap, we ourselves should sit down and say, well, let us look at this. Of course, the duties and responsibilities are not the same, but if we are ethical leaders, let us look at it and take it from there. And then, of course, effectiveness. Yeah, I think I've spoken about that. But deployment in the sense of governance is not about deploying your friends and your relatives and all of that, but it is simply a responsibility of the organization to deploy staff in positions for which they are qualified. Because once you take this thing of cadre deployment, I think it is not really part of ethical leadership, nor is it part of effective corporate governance. It is not. Cadre deployment, I will respond to it when we have a question and answer. Yeah, but deployment in this sense means distributing resources fairly and equitably in order to ensure that everyone is treated with dignity and with consistency and of course the last one would be consistency. What you do today in a particular context, it should be done even tomorrow. Now, having said that, let us then look at the benefits of ethical leadership and governance. Because I think for me, this is the crux of the matter, where we say, having looked at the ethical leadership and governance, but what benefits do we have in this? Number one, the benefits of strong ethical leadership and governance, it's about building stakeholder trust. If you follow the processes and procedures and policies systematically and honestly, then that builds the stakeholder trust. The stakeholders out there will have respect for you as a board or as a management or even as an executive manager, because what you do is consistent with the conscience and the policies of the company. Then, of course, it also enhances the reputation of your company, because you are following due processes of effectiveness and prioritization of things that need to be done properly and consistently. And then it promotes long-term success. By aligning ethics with strategy, companies can achieve sustainability and long-term success, creating a positive impact on society. And then it attracts talent. When a company is known for its reputation in ethical leadership and governance, evidently people will be interested in joining that company, because they will say, I can associate myself with that particular company. But if your company goes down the drain and it is always in the news for wrong reasons, people and even investors will look at it and say, do I really want to invest in that company? No, I can't, because that company is not run according to ethical standards as well as according to governance systems and procedures. And so finally, it improves the financial performance of a company, because you are able to say, I have done this, that, and the other. But most importantly, one needs not to be afraid of conducting a personal evaluation and a personal systematic evaluation and assessment. Because if you don't, then something is going to fall off the screws. because you are afraid of discovering those things that may potentially be your downfall as a company, or even your downfall as a CEO, as an individual. So that performance assessment is very important. You can either do it internally, or I always prefer it to be done externally. Or people who will tell you what it is and what you are, and without hiding any facts, because this is basically what governance is all about. Now, let me conclude by saying to you, colleagues, that Leo Buscaglia, that famous Italian American motivational speaker, would always conclude his sessions by saying, only you can make the difference. And before I quote him, there's a story, my professor, of an old man who was holding a bird. He was holding a bird in his hand. Sorry, it was the grandson. And then the grandson goes to the old man and says, Grandpa, the bird that I'm holding in my hand, is it dead or is it alive? Then the old man looked at the young man and said, look, the life of that bird is in your hands. Because if I say it is alive, you will throttle it and show it to me as dead. But if I say to you the opposite, you will let it fly. So the future of any organization and the future of a leader lies within him in observing and recognizing the importance of ethical behavior, the importance of corporate governance principles, and above all, the effects of doing what is right, even in the midst of an upside down environment. And so Leo Buscaglia says, only you can make the environment. The purpose of life is to help others. If you can't help them, would you at least not hurt them? Because to be is to do, and to do is to do now, because tomorrow might not be there. I thank you, Professor. I will wait for questions and answers. Thank you.
Well, thank you, my professor. Thank you so much for your very insightful and very instructive presentation there. Thank you so much. This is a very important topic, as I said earlier on when we started. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's the time to engage the professor. You can do that by raising your hand, or you can do that via the chat room. We always encourage colleagues to express themselves here. We are all professionals. We are all leaders. As I said, this is the community of leaders. So we can just ask questions, and then the professor will respond or will answer into what is happening. Professor, if I can just ask you, my professor, how difficult is ethical leadership? I mean, how can a person be ethical? Why, in other words, why leaders find it so difficult to be ethical and find themselves doing wrong things?
Thank you very much, my professor, for that question, which really is starting the debate. I think that for as long as people are saying to themselves, what is in it for me? Failing to look at the bigger picture. As Sobukwe spoke about self-subjugation, if a person has got so much interest in himself and not interest in society and the people that he or she serves, then that question will emerge. But if you subjugate yourself and say, I am doing this for the benefit of the society. And remember, I referred to the book by Prophet Landandwe. Akusiko kwami kwebantu. It is not about me, it is about the people. But immediately you say it is about me and less about the people, then you are not being ethical.
Thank you, my professor. Thank you so much for that crisp and very impactful response there. And I like this quotation, and I wonder why really we don't use it a lot, because I love this quotation you made from the late Sobukwe about that leaders must be complete self subjugation. That if you totally subjugate self, that you'll be able to lead other people. Do you think, is it about different contexts, different epochs, that maybe at that time, Sobogo and Martin Luther King, they could say that and do that, and that maybe within the context that we find ourselves now, the leaders that we find, they find it difficult to subjugate self, and find themselves serving self instead of serving others.
Yeah, that is very true, my professor. Remember that leadership is both situational and contextual. One could be a good leader in a particular context and be a bad leader in another context. But with the evolution of time, I think the principles of leadership, as enunciated by Sobukwe and Martin Luther King Jr., still find expression in the present contextual situation. Because right now, remember, I spoke about what Major General Mdluli is coming up with. It simply means
that is Mkhwanazi.
Mkhwanazi. Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, I nearly misled him. Yeah, Major General Mkhwanazi. That's right. Thank you, my professor. I think he has really hit it on the head, so that even in the present context, ethical leadership is of paramount importance. Were it not for these revelations which are coming up now, I don't think that the country would be where it is right now. Because you find leaders who continue to promote self-interest rather than the interests of society. If we were to look back a little bit about why Sobukwe and Martin Luther King and PLO, Lumumba, Nyerere, and all those guys who were promoting Pan-Africanism. Not that we are saying Pan-Africanism is irrelevant now. I think it is relevant as it was then. And so coming back to your question, my professor, let me relate a brief story without being very long in words. There was a discussion between a jackal and a dog. Now they meet in the bush, where the jackal goes around getting food for whatever he can lay his hands on. And the dog says to the jackal, "We belong to the same family, but why, my brother, are you so miserable, thin and lean and emaciated?" And the jackal responds by saying, "Look, if I'm lucky, I'm able to get one meal a day. But oftentimes I go without meal for the whole week." And said to the dog, "How many meals do you get?" And the dog says, "Well, I get 3 meals a day because my master ensures that I am well fed." And then the J-call notices that, and this example I got from the district bishop of what was called Grahamstown district then, but it's William Gemma now, Dr. Sox Leleki. And he says that the dog responds by saying, I get 3 meals a day. And the J-call observed that there was a mark on the neck of the dog and asked him, but if you get 3 meals a day, how come do you have such a terrible mark on your neck? And the dog responds by saying, well, my master, notwithstanding the fact that he gives me 3 meals a day, he chains me all the time. And sometimes even when I eat, I'm always chained. So the J-call says, so it means you're not free. One says, well, if you prefer to put it so, yes. Then the J-call says, well, I am happy that I am free, even though I go hungry quite often. But you, getting 3 meals a day, are not free. Now, if you take that and locate it within the context of leadership, you'll find the present day leaders being free because they get 3 meals a day, but contextually they are not free because they depend on what the master says. So it is better to be free in suffering than to be free in bondage. That is what is happening.
Perfect. Thank you, my professor. Thank you very much. I see hands are coming now. I'll take first. I see my sister there, Sis Cindy. We'll start with you. Sis Cindy, over to you, sis.
Thank you very much, Prof. First, I will apologize for not having my video on. I have a bit of an unkind headache and I'm sitting in a dark room. So thank you very much. So I'll start with the question and just give a little bit of a narration of where the question comes from. The concept, and I'm saying that very consciously, the concept of ethics and business ethics and corporate governance and those concepts, they seem to be, especially when we talk about them in the context of South Africa and what we see happening, and there seems to be an eclipsing of the government and the governance in our perspectives as a people. And it tends to make the issue or make it seem as if we are in a worse off position as a people. And my question is this, are we looking at the cause or the symptom? That is my question. And just a little bit of an anecdote behind that. Last week, I watched my 21-year-old son having to deal with an issue of having to pay a bribe because he was going to take his license. And this was given to him as, this is how things are done. Now, what I did not manage beforehand, which I thought about as he was going through that process, because I let him lead the process of getting his own license. What I did not manage upfront is to select a driving school that does not adhere to that. The truth is, I had actually forgotten. I went through the same thing. It took me over 5 years because I was very resistant. Now, here was my son sitting here and discovering that their driving school says if you do not pay the sweets, it's so called, you will fail and you will come back again and again. And that was very difficult for him. And I explained the story and I told him about my background and I gave it to him to make a call. It took 2 days for him to get around. And I said, because the driving school is saying so, chances of you getting it are hard unless we had fixed it at the core and gotten the right driving school, and then wouldn't have to have this conversation. But we are here now and we need to deal with this. He dealt with it, paid the bribe, got the license, went into depression for 3 days after that. Because to him, it just was so evident, this is the world that I'm living in. And it was such a hard thing for us to go through that. Now, my question, and there's another clip that is going around by Obama, who says when he was elected as president, one of the first things that he noticed is that he has the power, but the people with the purse, they call the shots. There are families whose names you have never heard mentioned in media who are actually running the show, which means the problem is deep in the society, and it's not a South African thing. And my question is, when we look at the principles and we put principles in it, and we talk about the ethics and the governance and all of that, are we actually looking at the cause or the symptom? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, my professor, would you like to respond one by one, or can we take Dr. Mangisa and then maybe you can respond to both of them?
Okay.
Oh, thank you, my professor. Let's take Dr. Mangisa there, and then Prof will respond to both of you. Over to you, Doc.
No, thank you, Prof. Majola, and thanks to Professor Zide. Quite a very significant and a powerful topic that talks to ethics and governance, and both concepts they seemed to have eluded us, especially those who are in political leadership. I hope, amongst us, there are advisors, to our political leaders, because they may not be here, as some of them pretend to be very busy at sometimes. The question for me, Prof. Zide, you may have touched it anecdotally, or you may have not, or I may have missed it. We cannot, that's my thesis. We cannot speak ethical leadership without conscience. Isazela or unembeza ngesizulu. Now, if we lack conscience, can we really be ethical? Can we be taught ethical leadership if there is that lack of ukulalela isazela sakho, unembezo wakho ukuthi ukutshela? Now, hence then, the other question for me is, should we be focusing on, I don't know how to put it, reinvigorating conscience rather than ethical leadership? Because, as I'm saying, my thesis is, without, effective conscience, there is no ethical leadership, and therefore governance, or corporate governance, for that matter. I begging Prof. Zide Blonda, I will await a response from you. Thank you so much for a powerful, topic.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Tim. Let me start with Cindy for very probing question, particularly when you were referring to the eclipsing of the two, ethical leadership and governance, and also citing the the process and the experience which your son went through, and whether or not we're dealing with the cause or the symptoms of a bigger problem. And then, of course, you saw, are we worse off now than before? I was just trying to recapture, the question. I think, Cindy, we are dealing with symptoms of a bigger problem. We have not as yet managed the causes. We're dealing with symptoms of a much bigger problem. And I will link this to yet another example. There was a video that was doing the rounds of a white farmer who was driving, and he was stopped by traffic officers for speeding. And the traffic officer asked him to produce his license, of course, after telling him that, look, he was running at a very high speed in an environment where he was not supposed to. Now, this guy produced, he said, officer, I've got 3 licenses. I've got my driver's license, which is R something. And then I've got another license, which is R100. And the other one is R200. And he produced the 3 and says, which one of the 3 would you like to have? One was a 200 rand note, the other one 100 rand note, and the other one was the real driver's license. So the officer said, well, let me take the 2, the R100 and the R200, and said, okay. And he did not take the driver's license, nor find him for speeding. But because he was given a 100 rand note and a 200 rand note, he let him off. So what your son has gone through, it can only happen to a very concerned parent, that it took you so long, but your son, having gone through this process and trying to process, the whole experience in his mind, suffered from depression. That is symptomatic of a bigger problem. And I'm going to link Dr. Mangisa's question to this one. Can ethics be taught? I think it is a subject that should really be taught, not at university. See, the mistake we are doing, we teach ethics 101 when we are at university, and yet ethics should start at primary school. This is where our education system is missing the point. Children should be taught at basic education what is right, what is wrong, what is good for society, and what is bad for society. But for as long as we do not do that, we will continue dealing with symptoms and not with the cause. But as the children grow up and having been exposed to ethical considerations at a lower level, I think this is where we can nip it in the bud. And as the children grow up, they will know that this is right, this is wrong, etc. But to let the process go on for such a long time, and only when one is at university, it's only then that one even hears about a course called Ethics 101. And I think that you're quite right, Cindy. We're dealing with symptoms of a bigger problem, and we can only deal with the causal effects at a lower level. And as children grow up, as the society develops and becomes wiser and more conscious driven, we will then be able to deal with those kinds of problems. Now, let me come to you, Mthembu, about ethical leadership as well as governance. That the concepts sometimes, elude us, and you're quite right. You're quite right. Whether ethical leadership can be driven by a conscious and a conscious understanding of who we are, who you are as a person, what is right and wrong. Remember in the olden days, when we were even at primary, certainly during my time, there was a book that was called Student Companion. The Student Companion, towards the end of that book, it used to be read in color. And I've just bought it in one of the second-hand shops just to show my grandchildren that this is what we learned. It is now green. Maybe it's going to evolve and be brown. But the Student Companion had a section where it was dealing with the responsibilities of a society, the responsibility of an individual towards society, where in fact it said that as a citizen had the right to arrest a person for doing wrong things. But that right has now been taken over to the extent that the rights that the country seems to be promoting are rights of the wrong, and the rights of the right are taking the backseat. And so I think that we can get your question, whether ethics can be taught. I say yes, it should. It is not a matter of can it be or can it not. It should, because if it is taught at a very early age, we will develop and grow in a country that understands what is right and wrong. For instance, I mean, I have had an honor to visit Singapore some couple of years back. In Singapore, you dare not dirty and spill anything you drink in the street, you'll be arrested immediately. And I always say in Singapore, you can have a nice breakfast. You can pull your chair and sit in a toilet and don't feel that you are eating breakfast in a toilet because it is spotlessly clean. Why can't that happen? Over the weekends, I was in PE, driving from, now PE, like any city, is divided into two. You have got the townships, you've got the urban areas. You go to the urban areas. I mean, I've got a house in Summerstrand. It's nice, clean, perfect. You don't even have potholes because it is about self-consciousness. But you go to the townships, it's a different ball game. The plastics are actually decorating the streets of the townships. You go anyway, you find plastics all over. Now, the morality of that is putting a challenge on us, particularly as Black people. And dirt and littering has come to be associated with Blacks, which is, to me, a very serious indictment. That should not be like that. Let me conclude, therefore, by saying ethics goes both with conscience and consciousness. And my humble opinion and view is that it should be taught at school, right from grade A. What is it? Grade 1, which is sub A in our old language. Thank you, my professor.
Thank you very much, my professor. Thanks a lot to our colleagues there. And indeed, I just want to agree with Sisindi. The topic we are talking about is not only a South African problem, but all over the world. You go to US, they do have ethical issues. Go to Germany, go to UK, go to Zambia, go to Malawi, anywhere. As long as you find a corner where there will be human beings, you will find the ethical issues. So I think that is why maybe it's something that need to be, I completely agree with Professor Zide that if we can just maybe start at lower level in teaching ethics, because conscience, there are so many structures and stakeholders that assist to develop someone's conscience, especially a child's conscience. Family is very important. And during the olden days, you remember that a child was not only raised by the family, it was raised by community. So it was easy to develop conscience of that child at a time, so that a girl will know that to kiss a boy publicly, was, whether it was wrong or not, but at that time, it was wrong. So that they will hide themselves, even if they are caught, not only by their parents, but even as long as it's an elder person, whether they know that person is from the community or they don't know, that person will just scold or beat them or discipline them. So it's something that was allowed. It was, and there was some kind of conscience of certain aspects that was built into the child. Friends are very important, as my professor said. By the time you go to university, it's too late to deal with that area. So it's very important. I agree with Dr. Zide, or Dr. Professor Zide, that ethical leadership can be taught. It can be taught and caught, because it can be taught, don't do this, but also it can be caught in terms of being exemplary. If you are living around an environment of ethical people, you will cut it, you will catch it. There are certain things that you don't even have to say it, but as you are seeing someone else does it, and then you are able to imitate that person. But yeah, let us, I see two hands. We'll take Bukeka, and then Bukeka will be followed by Sipiwe Mgadi, and then Professor will respond to them. Sis Bukeka, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and good evening. Thank you, Professor Zide, for delivering such a clear, thought-provoking about ethical leadership, and your passion around this topic. Like, can feel it. Well, when you started speaking, you said we are leaders without leadership, and exactly that is what is happening in our world right now. Yes, leaders have got we've got all these challenges all around, but maybe particularly for South Africa, yes, we have lack of ethical leadership. Yes, the corruption has taken the course, poor accountability, these are the principles that you've touched base on, lack of transparency on important things that needs to come, really, like that we need to know about it. Maybe they are the ones that are also making the problem. Like, also, what I would like to maybe question is that with all of this leadership crisis that we have in our country, and then maybe you already answered in your last comment now that leadership can be taught. But now, do you feel, or maybe anybody else, that in a leadership space that there is so much resistance to change, which is now the leaders that are the four leaders that are in the country that are really like undermining all these principles, undermining all these qualities. But there's some resistance to change, which maybe even if the education system would change and then the people will be taught ethical leadership. But now, what can be done with the resistance to change on the 4 leaders that is already there that are really undermining all these qualities, yet they know about them, but in terms of living with us, with these qualities or with these principles, and then they just not putting it in practice. But the question is that what can be done with a resistance to change, even though there's leaders that have this knowledge, that have been taught the ethics. I just hope my question there.
No.
You can just let me know, Professor Zidem, if there's maybe something that you want me to maybe say. Yes,
Thank you. Thanks, Sibukeka Sipiwe.
Thank you very much, Prof. Majola, for the opportunity. I would like to seek your insights, Prof. Zide, on a few matters related to governance and the electoral system. In your view, what are your thoughts on the current electoral system, particularly regarding the election of individuals to public office? Number 2, what system or criteria do you believe could be effectively used to identify and select ethical candidates to stand for public office? And then lastly, do you personally support the concept of one person, one vote, or one man, one vote? Or do you consider a political party representation system? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mpiwe. And Bukeka, that's a very interesting question. Let me start with Bomoi. I'll come back to you, Simpiwe, in that order. Bukeka, yes, your question basically is what can be done to deal with resistance to change. There will always be resistance. You know, for as long as you are doing the right thing, you must expect people to hate you for coming in with changes that are going to improve the system. Let me cite an example of and somebody said here that I think it was Lindelo, that in the process of ethical leadership and governance, we should not forget the role that religious faiths or religious leaders should play. And so, and I agree with you, Lindelo, about that. But why I'm referring to that, Bukeka, about resistance to change, there's a very brief story, my professor, that when the founding father of the Methodist Church, John Wesley, was traveling from the US back to England, there was a storm in the boat in which they were. And in one corner, there was a group of Moravians led by Peter Bola. And of course, the Methodists were huddling in another corner. And there was this big storm. And at that time, John Wesley was already a minister. He had accepted the call, or he had responded to the call. But as the ship or the boat was hit by this storm, he was afraid, together with his younger brother Charles and the whole team. But the Moravians in that corner were busy singing, praising, clapping hands, and all the hallelujahs of this world. And when the storm had died down, John Wesley goes to Peter Bola and said, Peter, were you not afraid when the boat was hit by a storm? And Peter Bola said, no, I was not afraid because I have faith. And John Wesley says, but how can one have faith? And Peter Bola's answer was, you must preach faith until you have it. Now, coming back to your question, I decided to preface my response by citing that example, that we must preach ethics until people have it. Whether any platform that we use, be it in church, be it in family, be it in government, be it anywhere, we must preach ethics until it is deeply rooted in our minds that ethical behavior is the way of living, it is the way of doing things right. And there will be no room for corruption for as long as we are doing things ethically. And I want to agree with Prof. Majola as well as Cindy that the issue of ethics is a global concern. It is not only a South African concern, it's a global concern. And right now, the issue of Israel and Palestine continues to be a global challenge. When I visited, that was 2002, I visited Israel, and we spent some time in University of Jerusalem and University of Haifa, etc. Now, when we were in Jerusalem, I said to academics there, but guys, why are you guys fighting? I mean, here you've got Palestinians, you've got Israelites, you're rubbing shoulders in the passages, and the answer was very simple, certainly from those that I spoke to during two time. And they said, this is a historical challenge. For as long as the people at the top fail to understand the needs of the people at the bottom, the problem will continue as it is. Because that, to me, sent a message of people who are more concerned about the challenges faced by society than problems and challenges faced by individuals. So that is it. Spill, the electoral system, it's a pity that my friend and brother here, Advocate Sizani, is not here. You would have responded to that question much better than I am going to attempt to do. He was the chairperson of the electoral something, these many committees that are set up by government. What I would like to see, certainly, I mean, it's my personal view, and I don't want to say to people they must accept it as a gospel truth or what, but I would like to see the president of a country not being voted into that position by a political party, but it should be a position that is voted for by the will of the people. I mean, if in America they can do it, that ultimately, of the number of states that are there, so many states would vote for Barack Obama or Trump, whatever it is. Let me just cite example of our own Methodist Church. The presiding bishop is elected via synods. We've got districts, and the district will nominate and elect the name of Bishop Nzimande, the name of Bishop whoever. And ultimately, the synods will say, well, of the 12 districts, 9 have voted for Bishop. I'm just citing that as an example, not that it happened like that. 9 districts or synods have voted for Bishop Nzimane. Only 3 have not. I think for me, that would be the way to go. Because right now, we have a party that is supposedly unethical, and because it is in the majority, we just have to accept what we are given and say, okay, then in Parliament, the party is in the majority. I propose the name of so-and-so to lead the party, and fine, and then so-and-so is made a president. For me, that is not democracy. Because if by democracy we mean the will of the people, then that is not democracy. It is the will of the political party and not the will of the people. And so that is something superior that I would argue for. The current system, certainly for me, I do vote nonetheless, but last elections I did not vote. I know which political party I voted for. Unfortunately, it did not make it so much, but that's neither here nor there. But I would really like to see a president specifically being elected by the states, of all the provinces in South Africa. Then let's go for that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, my professor. Thank you so much. Let's just look at the chat room, and our professor will be giving us his closing remarks. Bukeka saying happy belated birthday, Prof. Zide.
Thank you.
Cindy at 12 p.m. Right, congratulations, Prof. Vido Nyobala. Excellent presentation. The challenge is to translate these cognitive principles into behavioral goals. I assume that is Reverend Nyobala. Am I right, Prof?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Rev. And then Dr. Soraya says, great story, Prof. Emancipation has not transcended for us as a human race. And my brother there, Victor Songela, it's easy for an organization to behave ethically when leadership, board, and CEO are ethical and encourage and recognize ethical behavior, but a challenge almost impossible if the leadership does not display ethical leadership nor encourage such. Thank you, Prof. Zide, for this insightful presentation, and we need more of this to raise awareness about ethical behavior. Great examples used with Animal Kingdom. Thank you, Prof. Majola, for bringing in the best. One of our own this time is always, no questions. Astiniko Baloi, thank you for the excellent presentation. And then that is Sislindelo. Let's also not be shy to mention the role a religious institution could play in this pandemic. Cindy, thank you very much to both of you, Profs, Linde Kaya Zide, to translate these cognitive principles of ethics and governance into behavioral goals requires an implementation of a comprehensive education at an early age and training programs that would I can't see there, sorry, ethics in society. Certainly building a culture of morality and integrity would go a long way in ensuring that there is a nexus between ethics and governance. Dr. Kuma Mangisa, uze ube nobum obute baundlovu. There's more still be learned from you. Thank you so much, colleagues, for those comments. Prof, may I invite you to give us your response and your closing remarks, and then we close the session after this. Over to you, my professor.
Okay. Thank you very much, my professor. It is always humbling to stand before this group and share whatever insights we have. And of course, we take our cue from your kind self, my professor, and Dr. Mazwe Majola. You know, I always admire the way you conduct and you push us into the same kind of direction. That is what ethical leadership is. But finally, let me come back and say, colleagues, I believe very sincerely in doing the right things at the right time in the right manner. Because without us doing the right things, we will be leading the country astray. I must say that we've got so many people, leaders who are qualified even to stand before Parliament and talk about ethical leadership without holding back their views. But unfortunately, because they belong to a political party or they don't belong to any political party, the government of the day will not use their experiences and their knowledge. But for as long as we live in that vacuum of appreciating what is not available in government, but it is outside of government, we will always be faced with these challenges. That equally, Sis Lindela, translates to our religious organizations. You know, there was a time when the South African Council of Churches was the voice of the people during the times of Desmond Tutu as the Secretary General of the SACC. And one looks back and says, what happened to that spirit of resistance, the spirit of pushing and pushing and pushing? And there was a time when women of our country were recognized as pillars of the community and therefore were given high respect, admiration, and adoration. And I yearn for those days because I'm saying to myself, how can it be that a man born of a woman does not appreciate and recognize the power that the women have in shaping and sharpening the ethics and the governance processes of our country? I think finally, we need, colleagues, to go back to the drawing board and say to ourselves, one, the government of the day, whether it is the ANC or the DA or whatever is the government of national unity all about, should go back to the drawing board and say, let us find ethical leaders outside of government, not to occupy political positions, but to take us through the journey of ethical leadership. I think for me, that would be a plus. Number two, let us find a way of influencing in our small corners, influencing the role played by women who are mothers of the country and mothers of society and mothers of community and mothers of family, and say, give the power to women to change the status quo. Believe, when we launched the book, I remember perfectly saying, if for the month of August, the political system, if we are serious about recognizing women, why can't for the month of August say this month is going to be given to women to run the country just for a month? Believe you me, Bugega, you'll see the difference. In that process, women will make a fundamental change to the thinking of the country. And so with those words, I think we really need to go back to the drawing board and insist on ethical leadership and governance based on the principles which I've just cited. And thank you so much, my professor.
Thanks a lot. As I said earlier, we always learn a lot from you. Thank you for inspiring us, for encouraging us and empowering us tonight. Very insightful, very instructive, impactful presentation. and we will definitely continue to fight this battle, ethical leadership and governance, so that we can try whatever we can on our corner, and while others are doing the same in their own corners or on their own corners. Thank you so much for really for a well-delivered presentation. And as you said, that we are very tired, just been on the road coming from Port Elizabeth. Thank you. And that is what you always teach us here in this platform, that sacrificial leadership that you have. We learn a lot from you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I thank you so much for joining us, especially for those who joined us for the first time. We appreciate you, we admire you, we thank you for your presence, and please do remember that we meet every Wednesday. If you don't mind, please do join us again next week. We'll be having another powerful speaker and a lovely topic, as we always do in this platform. We'll meet again next week. The session is adjourned now until we meet again next week, Wednesday, same time, same place, same details, everything the same. Thank you so much, and may God bless you, and may God bless Africa, our beloved continent. Thank you, and goodbye. God bless.